In the heart of Seattle, on a night when ambition towered higher than the city's skyline, one decision shattered a bond neither of them dared to name. Riley Watson, the quiet force behind a billionaire's empire, was cast out with ruthless precision, and a truth left unsaid, but fate is relentless. 10 years of buried emotions, broken trust, and unspoken longing are about to resurface. A secret trembles at the edge of revelation. A past mistake demands redemption. And between duty and desire, a single choice could change everything. If you love emotional, dramatic romances, subscribe now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers so this channel can continue to grow. Your support keeps these stories alive. Seattle glowed under a curtain of soft evening rain, each drop shimmering against glass towers that reflected the restless pulse of the city. Inside the upper floors of Kingsley Technologies, where silence carried the weight of wealth and ambition, Riley Watson moved with the quiet precision that had become her trademark. She walked through the executive wing with her leather-bound notebook held close to her chest, her steps light, focused, and almost invisible. She knew every rhythm of this place, every tension beneath its immaculate surface, every small detail that kept the empire upright. Riley adjusted the cuff of her cream blouse and tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. Her hazel eyes traced the polished corridors, checking once more that the documents for the board meeting were perfectly aligned, the briefing notes printed, and the investor packets placed exactly where they belonged. It was the kind of care no one ever praised, yet everyone relied on. She did not need applause. She needed order. But whenever she entered Wyatt Kingsley's office, her heart shifted in ways she pretended not to understand. Wyatt stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette cut sharply against the silver landscape. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that molded to his frame with effortless authority. His dark hair, still damp from the drizzle outside, was brushed back in a way that revealed the strong line of his jaw. Even in stillness, he radiated the commanding presence of a man who had conquered every room he stepped into. He glanced over his shoulder the moment she appeared, as if he had sensed her before she spoke. "Good evening, Riley," he said softly, his voice low and smooth, carrying a weight that always unsettled her. "You did not have to stay this late." "I wanted to make sure everything was ready before tomorrow," she replied, placing the folders on his desk with practiced grace. "Your presentation begins at 9. All final updates have been integrated." Wyatt's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, tracing the calm strength in her posture, the subtle restraint in her expression. "You always think ahead," he murmured. "Sometimes it feels as if you know what I need before I ask." Riley tried to smile, keeping her voice steady. "Sometimes you ask without realizing it." A flicker of warmth touched his features, quickly hidden behind the controlled intensity he wore like armor. He leaned his palms on the desk, his sleeves sliding back just enough to reveal the elegant watch that gleamed against his skin. "Tell me the real reason you stayed. This project has taken a toll on everyone." "I wanted it to go well," she admitted quietly. "For the company, and for you." Wyatt's eyes softened, a rare fracture in his impenetrable composure. "Riley, you take on too much for my sake." Their gazes held for a heartbeat too long. It was not romantic by intention, but romantic by truth. Two people bound by a closeness neither dared naming. Riley looked away first, inhaling slowly to steady herself. She reminded her heart of reality. She was his assistant, nothing more. Whatever warmth passed between them lived only in the spaces where professionalism blurred and silence grew too intimate. Wyatt straightened as his phone vibrated sharply. The moment shattered. He checked the screen, his expression darkening. "Wyatt," Riley asked softly. He exhaled, frustration tightening his jaw. "There is trouble with the product launch. A detail leaked online. The wrong detail." Her breath caught. "How serious is it?" "Serious enough that investors are demanding answers tonight," he replied. He pushed a hand through his hair, agitation breaking through the controlled facade. Someone inside had access to this file. Someone betrayed us. Riley felt a ripple of confusion. Their internal security was airtight. Leaks did not happen, not here, not under Wyatt. "Tell Samuel to pull every access log from the past week," Riley said gently. "He will find the source." Wyatt looked at her again, his voice lower, rougher. "Stay with me through this. You always keep my head clear." Her chest tightened at the admission. "Of course," she whispered. The tension in the room shifted. Less business, more something unnamed, something fragile and charged. Wyatt stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. "Riley," he murmured, her name falling from his lips like a confession he was not ready to make. Her pulse fluttered. "Yes?" But before he could answer, Samuel knocked on the doorframe, breaking the moment cleanly. "Sir, the logs are ready." Wyatt stepped back. The air between him and Riley held the imprint of something that almost happened. "Bring them in," Wyatt said, his voice edged with command again. As Samuel entered, Riley caught a glimpse of the report he carried. Her name, her system credentials, appeared at the top of the page. She frowned in confusion, her breath faltering. Wyatt's expression changed instantly, hardening into something fierce and unreadable. Riley pressed a hand against her notebook, feeling the tremor in her fingers. The rain outside deepened, tapping the windows with restless insistence, as if the city itself sensed the storm about to break inside the room. "Wyatt," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but he was no longer looking at her with softness. And for the first time in years, Riley felt the ground beneath her shift. The storm pressing against the windows of Kingsley Technologies felt strangely synchronized with the tension tightening the air inside the executive wing. Rain traveled down the glass in trembling lines, mirroring Riley Watson's heartbeat as she stood beside Wyatt Kingsley's desk, her eyes absorbing the unsettling report Samuel Greer had just delivered. Her name, her credentials, a digital fingerprint she did not recognize. She felt the world shift as if the floor under her heels had softened into water. Wyatt scanned the document with a gaze that hardened more with each second. The warmth of a few moments earlier disappeared behind a cold, commanding wall. The man who had spoken her name with a tenderness that shook her knees now looked at her as if she were a threat to everything he had built. "Riley," he said slowly, each syllable edged with restraint. "This report shows that the breach came through your access." His voice cut deeper than he realized. Riley swallowed her shock. "That cannot be right," she whispered, taking a hesitant step closer. "I never opened or forwarded anything from that folder. I would never risk the company. I would never risk you." Her final words slipped out before she could cage them, revealing more than she intended. Wyatt's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, as if part of him felt the stab of those words, but the rest of him, his pride, his fear, his carefully guarded image, rose like a shield. Samuel cleared his throat quietly. "Sir, this is only the preliminary report. We should run deeper checks before coming to any conclusion." Wyatt held up a hand, silencing him. His attention remained fixed on Riley, his expression unreadable beneath the storm of frustration gathering inside him. "When did you last access this file?" he asked. "I did not," she said without hesitation. "Not at any point." Wyatt's jaw tensed. "The logs say otherwise." Riley's breath trembled. She moved around the desk, careful but firm, and stood in front of him with a courage she usually kept hidden. "Wyatt, please look at me." He did, slowly, reluctantly. His blue-grey eyes locked with hers, and their shared history pulsed between them. Years of unspoken trust, unspoken closeness, unspoken longing. "Do you believe," Riley continued softly, "that I would ever betray you?" Her voice carried no defense, no panic, just the quiet truth of a woman who had dedicated more of her heart to a man than she ever admitted aloud. Wyatt exhaled a slow breath, and for a second something fragile flickered in his eyes. But then the moment shattered beneath the weight of responsibility he carried like armor. "I cannot ignore evidence," he said, voice tightening. Not tonight. Not with the board watching every move I make. Riley felt something cold coil around her ribs. She took a step back, not because she feared him, but because she suddenly feared what he was becoming in this moment. "Wyatt," she whispered, "you are letting fear speak for you." His eyes flashed. "Fear protects what matters." "And what matters more?" she asked softly. "Your company's image, or the truth about the people who have stood by you?" Wyatt looked away. It was the first time she had ever seen him unable to meet her gaze. Samuel shifted awkwardly near the door, the tension crackling in the space like electricity. "Sir," he murmured, "perhaps we should address this privately." But Wyatt moved past both of them and pressed the intercom button. "Gather the executive team in the conference room," he said. "Now." Riley felt her breath catch. "Wyatt, please," she said in a strained whisper. "Do not do this publicly. Talk to me first. You know me." He paused, his hand still resting on the intercom panel. She watched his shoulders rise and fall with a slow breath, as if he battled something unseen inside himself. But when he turned back to her, his expression had sealed shut. "This is not personal, Riley," he said, though his voice betrayed the tremor of a man telling a lie he wanted to believe. Riley shook her head gently. "Everything between us is personal, even the things we pretend are not." The words hung between them, full and trembling, like a confession she never intended to speak aloud. Wyatt's eyes darkened, wounded by the truth he refused to acknowledge. "This ends tonight," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself. The executive team gathered quickly. The glass conference room, usually a space of strategy and ambition, now felt like a stage lit for tragedy. Rain streamed behind the glass walls like falling silver curtains, isolating them from the world outside. Riley stood alone at the center, her hands folded calmly before her, her blouse pristine, despite the storm inside her chest. She would not let them see her break. Not here. Not now. Wyatt entered last, his presence silencing the room. He carried authority like a second skin, but tonight it felt heavier, like a burden he believed he had no choice but to lift. Samuel placed the report on the table. The executives exchanged careful glances, uncertainty rippling through them. Wyatt cleared his throat. "A leak occurred regarding the product launch. After reviewing the preliminary security logs, we identified the source as internal." Riley felt a faint pulse in her temples. She stared at Wyatt, not angrily, not pleadingly, but with a profound ache of disbelief. Riley Watson's credentials were used to access and distribute the compromised file. A soft gasp escaped from someone in the room. Wyatt continued, each word sounding less like truth and more like a script written under pressure. "Given the severity of the breach, effective immediately, Riley Watson is terminated from her position at Kingsley Technologies." The room stilled. Riley did not gasp. She did not cry. She did not speak. She only held Wyatt's gaze, letting him see everything he was destroying with a single decision. Wyatt looked back at her, and something inside him faltered. He had expected her anger, her denial, her desperation, but all she offered him was quiet heartbreak and an elegance he did not deserve. "Riley," he said under his breath, too softly for the room to hear, "you leave me no choice." She tilted her chin slightly. "There is always a choice, Wyatt. You just did not choose me." The words pierced him with surgical precision. A silence followed, heavy enough to bend steel. With the dignity of a woman who refused to be shattered in front of people who underestimated her, Riley picked up her small box of belongings, her notebook, her pen set, her framed picture of her grandmother. No more than these few reminders of a life she had shaped around loyalty, sacrifice, and a hope she never admitted. She walked toward the door, passing Wyatt at close range. The moment her shoulder brushed his arm, a tremor of electricity traveled through both of them. He almost reached for her, almost broke, almost stopped the disaster he had created, but his hand stayed at his side. Riley paused, just long enough to whisper the truth that would haunt him long after she left. "I believed in you. even when you could not see yourself, and you repaid me by refusing to see me at all." Wyatt's throat tightened so sharply he could not speak. Riley stepped out of the conference room, her heels echoing down the polished corridor like a final goodbye. Her silhouette disappeared into the dim glow of the elevator hallway, where rainlight reflected on her hair like a fragile halo. Only after the door closed behind her did Wyatt exhale, but the breath felt wrong, painful, like the city had turned against him. Samuel approached cautiously. "Sir, should I escort her out?" Wyatt shook his head. His voice was faint. "No, she does not need anyone to walk her out. She has always walked alone." The day when he turned back toward the conference room, every executive avoided his eyes. A man who had once seemed untouchable now looked like a king who had broken his crown with his own hand. Outside, Riley stepped into the rain with her small box pressed to her chest. She did not rush, she did not tremble, but as the cold drops touched her skin, a quiet tear finally escaped down her cheek. She whispered to the night, not expecting it to answer. "How could he think so little of me when I gave him so much?" Her voice cracked softly, lost beneath the steady hum of Seattle's rain. And as she walked away from the building she had devoted years of her life to, the storm around her felt kinder than the man she had left behind. Seattle's morning rain fell softly over the city, gentler than the storm that had broken Riley Watson's world the night before. The sky carried a pale silver glow as she walked through her small apartment, moving with the quiet stiffness of someone trying to keep her heart from shattering entirely. Her box of belongings sat on the kitchen counter, untouched since she set it down. The framed photograph of her grandmother peeked through the cardboard edge, reminding her of the promise she made years earlier, to live with dignity, no matter how deeply life cut her. Riley wrapped her arms around herself, her cream sweater warm against the chill seeping through the windows. She inhaled slowly, as if breathing carefully could hold her together. But every time she blinked, she saw Wyatt standing in that glass conference room, his voice steady and cold, choosing the company over her, choosing fear over truth, choosing everything except the loyalty she had given him without question. She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering a truth she had never dared speak aloud. "I loved you more than I should have." Her voice trembled into silence. After a long minute, Riley straightened her shoulders. Pain did not take away her purpose. She had built herself once. She could do it again, and she would not allow humiliation to define her. She prepared coffee, forcing herself to sip it even though her stomach was too tight for comfort. The warmth grounded her just enough to dress and gather her things. She needed to move, to breathe a different air, to reclaim space that did not belong to Wyatt Kingsley. By mid-morning, she stepped out into the city streets. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, casting a delicate shimmer over the pavement. People walked quickly, umbrellas swaying like floating blossoms. Riley found comfort in the anonymity of a crowd that knew nothing about her heartbreak. She spent the morning sending discreet emails to a few trusted industry acquaintances, not asking for help, but signaling her availability. She refused to beg for rescue. Her pride remained intact. Around midday, she entered a cozy bookstore cafe tucked between two tall buildings. Its warm lights, wooden shelves, and soft scent of roasted coffee wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. It was the kind of place where no one expected anything from her. She chose a quiet table near the window and opened her notebook, the one she had carried faithfully through years at Kingsley Technologies. She ran her fingertips along the familiar pages, then pressed her pen to the blank paper. But the words did not come. The door opened behind her, and a familiar voice floated through the space. "Riley!" She looked up sharply. Ethan Park approached with a warm, hesitant smile. He wore a charcoal sweater under a light rain jacket, his hair slightly tousled from the drizzle. His dark eyes carried a softness that contrasted sharply with the cold scrutiny she had endured the night before. "Ethan," she breathed, managing a surprised but genuine smile. "What are you doing here?" "I saw your message this morning," he replied gently, setting his laptop bag down at the edge of her table. "I was worried. Are you all right?" Riley hesitated. She did not want pity. But Ethan's gaze was not pitying. It was attentive, caring, honest. "I will be," she said quietly. "I'm trying to find my next step." "Well," Ethan said, taking the seat across from her, "you do not have to find it alone." She blinked at him, touched despite herself. "I did not expect you to say that," he offered a kind smile. "You are one of the most competent people in this city, Riley. Anyone who worked with you knows that. And I'm serious when I say this. You deserve better than what happened." Her eyes clouded with emotion. She lowered her gaze so he would not see how deeply the words struck her. Ethan reached across the table, not touching her, but letting his hand rest close enough to offer comfort. "If you want, I can introduce you to a few people. Or," his tone softened further, "you could join us." She looked up again, startled. "Join your company?" "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "We are expanding rapidly. I need someone who understands structure, someone who can build order from chaos. You are that person." Riley's breath caught. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about it," he said with a gentle earnestness that soothed the sting still burning inside her. No pressure, just the truth. Riley felt her heart steadying beat by beat. "I will think about it." His smile brightened. "That is all I wanted to hear." At that moment, the cafe door opened again, letting in a rush of cold air. Riley did not look up immediately, but a strange tension rippled through her body, as if her soul recognized a presence before her eyes did. And when she finally turned her head toward the entrance, she saw him, Wyatt Kingsley. He stepped into the warm cafe, rain still clinging to the shoulders of his black coat. His hair was damp, his jaw taut, his expression a mix of exhaustion and something deeper, something almost wounded. He scanned the room with sharp intensity, searching for something he could not name. Then he saw her. Riley felt her breath freeze. Wyatt's eyes locked onto her across the room, and the world seemed to narrow into a single pulsing moment. He took a step forward before stopping abruptly, as if realizing he had no right to approach her. Ethan noticed the shift in Riley's posture. "Riley, are you all right?" She forced a small smile. "Yes, just surprised." Wyatt looked away briefly, then back at her. The mask he wore at the office was gone. What remained was the raw edge of a man stripped of certainty. His gaze dropped to the sight of Ethan seated across from her. Something flickered in his eyes, a spark of jealousy he tried and failed to extinguish. Ethan, oblivious to the storm Wyatt was choking down, leaned slightly toward Riley. "If you want to continue our conversation somewhere quieter, we can." Riley opened her mouth to respond, but her gaze drifted back to Wyatt, drawn to him by a magnetic force she resented, but could not deny. His blue-grey eyes were not cold this time. They were full of questions, full of something almost like regret. He hesitated, then slowly walked toward her table. Riley straightened. Her pulse fluttered, but not with hope, only with the ache of unresolved words left hanging between them. Wyatt stopped at the edge of their table. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Riley." Ethan looked up politely. "Good afternoon. Can we help you?" Wyatt's jaw tightened. He spoke without taking his eyes off Riley. "I would like a moment with her." Ethan blinked. "We were in the middle of something." The tension between the two men sharpened instantly. Riley placed a hand gently on the table. "Ethan," she said softly, "it is all right." Ethan studied her expression, then nodded slowly. "I will get us more coffee." Before standing, he added quietly, "I will be right over there if you need me." Riley managed a grateful smile. "Thank you." Wyatt watched Ethan walk away, then looked down at Riley with an expression she could not decipher. "You look—" His voice trailed off as if the words failed him. Riley held his gaze. "I look what, Wyatt?" Wyatt inhaled, surrendering to the truth that slipped through him. "I look at you, and it hurts more than I expected." Her breath trembled, but she kept her composure. "It should not hurt at all. You made your choice." "Riley," he murmured, stepping closer. "I never meant—" She raised a hand, stopping him gently but firmly. "Do not tell me what you meant. Tell me what you did." Wyatt's throat tightened. Her eyes held him with a strength he had underestimated. Gone was the quiet assistant who tiptoed around his storms. This woman was reclaiming herself. "I regret the way it happened," he said quietly. "Do you regret firing me?" she asked. He swallowed. "I regret that I hurt you." "That is not the same," she whispered. A silent beat stretched between them. Wyatt slowly reached out, his fingers trembling, and brushed a raindrop from the sleeve of her sweater. The contact was soft, reverent, filled with every emotion he could not voice. Riley inhaled sharply, her heart twisting painfully. "Riley," he said, voice low, "I miss your presence." The confession cut her deeply. Not because it was untrue, but because it arrived too late. She stepped back, removing her arm from his gentle touch. "Missing me is not the same as valuing me." Wyatt's expression faltered, wounded. "I do value you." "Then you should have fought for me," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes glistened. "Instead, you sacrificed me to protect your image." Wyatt closed his eyes briefly, battling a storm inside him. "I was afraid." Her voice softened, but her resolve did not. "We are all afraid, Wyatt, but not all of us make the people we care about pay for it." He opened his eyes again, and the raw emotion in them nearly broke her. "Riley," he whispered, but she shook her head gently. "I cannot do this right now." Ethan returned with 2 coffees, his expression calm but watchful. Riley took hers with a quiet thank you and stood up. "I should go," she said softly. Wyatt reached out instinctively, catching her wrist with a touch so light it felt like a plea. "Riley, please." She turned slowly, meeting his gaze one final time. "Do not ask me for something you never learned to give." He let her go. Riley walked toward the door with Ethan beside her, the warmth of the cafe contrasting painfully with the cold ache inside her chest. As she stepped out into the soft rain, she felt something unexpected, a small spark of hope, not for Wyatt, but for herself. Behind her, framed by the cafe's golden lights, Wyatt stood alone, watching her disappear into the misty Seattle afternoon. For the first time, he truly understood what loss felt like. And Riley, wrapped in the gentle drizzle, breathed in a fragile, trembling truth. She had survived the breaking. Now she needed to survive the healing. The city awoke beneath a curtain of grey clouds. The early light stretched thin across Seattle's skyline. Inside his penthouse, Wyatt Kingsley stood before the wide windows, staring down at a world he controlled only in appearance. The view was as precise and polished as every part of his public life. Yet everything inside him felt unsettled, disordered, strangely fragile. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass, a man who looked composed but carried the restless shadow of something broken. He had not slept. He had spent the entire night pacing between the living room and his office, replaying Riley's face over and over again. Her hurt, her stillness, the quiet dignity with which she let him go. A few simple words from her had lodged inside him like a thorn. "You should have fought for me." He pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the tightness that had not eased since she walked out of the cafe the day before. A soft knock sounded at his door. "Sir?" Samuel Greer entered with the same quiet professionalism he always carried. "I have the full security logs you requested." Wyatt turned, grateful for something to focus on, though the turmoil inside him did not fade. "Bring everything here." Samuel placed a thick folder on the coffee table. "There are inconsistencies," he said in a low, careful tone. "Nothing definitive yet, but enough that you should look." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Explain." Samuel hesitated. "There are duplicate timestamps on certain entries, and there are signs of elevated access permissions that were changed without record of approval. That should not be possible unless someone with authority manipulated the system." Wyatt felt a cold, slow anger coil through him, not at Riley but at the situation. Why was this not brought to me immediately? "I wanted to double-check before raising suspicion," Samuel replied. The last thing we need is unnecessary chaos. Wyatt opened the folder, scanning line after line. Several entries had been altered. Others bore Riley's credentials, but the patterns did not match her behavior. He knew her work style better than he knew his own breath. She was meticulous, consistent, predictable in all the best ways. These entries looked nothing like her digital fingerprint. Something felt wrong, very wrong, and yet he had fired her anyway. Wyatt closed his eyes briefly, swallowing hard. He spoke without looking at Samuel. "Has she received any official communication from the company since yesterday?" "No, sir," Samuel replied. "Only your message." Wyatt stiffened. His message, the one he typed at dawn in a moment of spiraling guilt, attempting to apologize without exposing vulnerability. It had been stiff, formal, detached, exactly the things Riley did not deserve. "She did not respond," Wyatt murmured. Samuel, tactful as always, said nothing. Wyatt exhaled slowly. "Prepare a full investigation. I want every irregularity analyzed, and I may need to speak with her again." Samuel nodded with a quiet understanding. "Yes, sir." Wyatt watched him leave, then looked back at the lines of altered code. For the first time in longer than he could remember, fear was not his enemy. Regret was. Riley Watson had been the only person who understood the man behind his armor, and he had shattered her trust without letting her speak, without granting her the dignity of truth. No amount of logic or evidence could erase what he had done, but he needed to make it right, if she let him. Meanwhile, across the city, Riley sat at her kitchen counter with a cup of tea, warming her palms. Her apartment felt strangely unfamiliar today, as if her exile from Kingsley Technologies had changed the lighting, the air, even the shadows in the corners. But she was determined not to let grief swallow her. She opened her laptop to review a message from Ethan Park. He had sent her a list of potential roles within his growing company, each position described thoughtfully and respectfully. Ethan had made it clear she would choose her place, rather than be placed into it. It was the kind of respect she had rarely felt in her old world. She smiled softly at the thought, grateful for his kindness. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Wyatt. Riley hesitated. Her finger hovered over the screen before she finally opened it. "Riley, I want to discuss what happened. I owe you an explanation. Wyatt." She read it twice, then closed the phone with a soft exhale. It was better than the first message, but still wrapped in the kind of restraint he always used when fear was masquerading as strength. She was not ready, and she did not owe him her immediate response. When she finally stepped outside, she wrapped her coat around her and let the cold morning rain freshen her senses. She walked toward a small park nearby, needing the open space. The city trees dripped with dew, leaves glistening like tiny mirrors catching the light. Children's laughter rose faintly from a playground, an oddly comforting contrast to the heaviness inside her. She sat on a bench beneath a maple tree and closed her eyes for a moment. Her heart still carried the weight of Wyatt's betrayal, but she would not let grief define her next steps. Riley opened her eyes when she sensed someone approaching. Ethan. He smiled warmly as he sat beside her. "I figured this is where you come to think." She let out a soft laugh, surprised. "You guessed correctly. I wanted to check on you," he said gently, "and make sure you know that I meant everything I said yesterday. You deserve a space where you can grow without having to shrink yourself for someone else." Riley lowered her gaze. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot." He reached out and lightly touched her hand. "You do not have to rush any decisions, but I would be honored to work with you." Riley felt her heart warm at the sincerity in his touch, the quiet reassurance he offered so easily. She squeezed his hand gently in gratitude, but that tender moment flickered when she noticed a familiar black car parked at the curb across the street. Wyatt stepped out. Their eyes met instantly, even from a distance. He looked immaculate in a tailored navy coat, but the exhaustion lingering in his features softened his usual imposing presence. His gaze found hers with purposeful intensity, as if he had followed an invisible thread that led him straight to her. Riley's breath tightened. Ethan followed her gaze and stiffened. "Do you want me to stay?" She hesitated, her heart caught between two truths. Ethan's presence felt safe. Wyatt's presence felt like an open wound. "I think," she said softly, "I should hear what he has to say." Ethan nodded and stood. "I will be close if you need me." She offered him a grateful look as he stepped away. Wyatt approached slowly, as though afraid a sudden move would push her farther from him. Rain misted lightly around them, making the air shimmer with suspended droplets. "Riley," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. "Thank you for giving me a moment." She folded her hands in her lap, keeping her voice controlled. "What do you want, Wyatt?" His throat tightened. "To apologize, properly this time." She waited. She gave him nothing to soften the moment. Wyatt drew a breath, removed his gloves and held them in one hand, exposing the tremor in his fingers. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "and I was afraid. That does not justify what I did, but it is the truth." "You were afraid of losing control," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "So you sacrificed me to feel safe." He winced. "Yes," he admitted, "I did." Riley's eyes shimmered with hurt, but she remained composed. "You did not ask me. You did not listen. You did not even look at me as someone who mattered." He stepped closer, his expression raw. "You matter to me, Riley, more than I have wanted to admit." Her breath trembled. She looked away, afraid the truth in his voice might weaken her resolve. Wyatt knelt slightly, lowering himself to her eye level. Rain gathered in his hair, sliding down the sharp line of his jaw. "Please look at me," he whispered. Slowly she did. Wyatt inhaled as if her gaze restored something inside him. "I miss your presence, your steadiness, the way you made everything around me feel possible." Riley blinked back a tear. "You miss the comfort I gave you, but comfort is not love." His heartbeat stumbled. "I know. Do you?" she asked softly. "Because you still speak as if I exist for you." Wyatt closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a humility she had never seen in him. "No, you do not exist for me, but you have shaped me, and I do not want to lose the chance to make things right." Riley's voice cracked slightly. "Why now? Why come here?" Wyatt hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out the security report. "Because something is wrong. There are inconsistencies. Access logs that do not belong to you. Changes that you did not make." Riley's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I should have trusted you." His voice softened, trembling. "And I am sorry I didn't." The wind shifted, brushing a strand of her hair across her face. Wyatt lifted a hand slowly, as if approaching a fragile miracle, and tucked the strand gently behind her ear. His fingertips grazed her cheek with reverence, carrying all the emotion he had suffocated for years. Riley inhaled sharply at the tender contact, her heart tightening with a mix of longing and pain. "Wyatt," she whispered, "do not make this harder." He stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath against the cool rain. "You once told me everything between us was personal," he murmured. "You were right. And I am sorry I used professionalism as a shield to avoid the truth." Her eyes filled with emotion she could not voice. Wyatt lowered his forehead to hers, barely touching, just enough to share the same breath. "Tell me how to fix this," he whispered. Riley closed her eyes, fighting the pull of him, the magnetic force that had always existed beneath the surface of their professional world. "Fixing it is not the same as undoing it," she said gently. He exhaled shakily, feeling the truth cut through him. "Then let me at least begin," he murmured. Riley stepped back slowly, breaking the fragile contact. "I need time, and space, and honesty. You will have all three," he said softly. She nodded, tears shimmering in her lashes. "I hope so." Wyatt watched her with a tenderness that felt both new and painfully overdue. He reached out as though to take her hand, but stopped himself. "Riley," he said in a low, reverent tone, "I am not asking you for forgiveness. I am asking for a chance to be better than the man who hurt you." Her breath trembled once more, and she looked at him with a mix of sorrow and yearning. "Then start by letting me walk away for now," she whispered. Wyatt swallowed the ache rising in his chest. "If that is what you need, I will not stop you." Riley offered him one last glance, soft, wounded, beautiful, then turned and walked toward the path lined with wet leaves and quiet benches. Wyatt stood under the soft rain watching her go, the first true crack in his armor widening into something he could no longer deny. Seattle shimmered under a gentle evening rain that scattered diamonds across the pavement and cast a soft glow over the city's lights. The prestigious Kingsley Foundation Charity Gala was set to begin at 6 in the evening, and already limousines lined the entrance of the grand event hall overlooking Elliott Bay. The building resembled a palace of glass and gold, its tall windows revealing chandeliers sparkling like constellations suspended in air. A red carpet stretched out front, glistening beneath umbrellas and elegant heels. Riley Watson stepped out of a rideshare car, smoothing her deep emerald dress as the rain misted her hair. It was her first formal event since losing her job, and she had hesitated before agreeing to come. Ethan Park's company was sponsoring one of the scholarship awards tonight, and he had asked her to accompany him as part of their team. It was not a date. It was not a declaration. But it was an invitation to stand in a room she once entered only at the shadow of someone else. Now she was walking in on her own terms. The dress hugged her subtly, a graceful silhouette with a soft, off-the-shoulder neckline that revealed the elegant line of her collarbones. Her brown hair fell in smooth waves, catching flecks of gold from the passing lights. She looked beautiful, but more importantly, she looked whole. "Riley," Ethan said warmly as he stepped beside her, adjusting his charcoal suit. "You look incredible." She smiled softly. "Thank you. You do too." He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" She slid her hand gently around his elbow, but her stomach fluttered for reasons she refused to name. This gala had once been her entire world, coordinating Wyatt's schedule, arranging his meetings, making certain every detail was flawless, so his presence appeared effortless. Tonight she entered as someone completely different. Inside, the ballroom glowed with warm golden light. Crystal chandeliers reflected dozens of times across polished floors. Tables dressed in ivory linens surrounded a central stage decorated with white orchids and candles. The hum of polite conversation filled the air, accompanied by the soft, velvety tones of a string quartet. Riley inhaled slowly. It felt both familiar and distant, like a memory she could observe without re-entering. Ethan guided her toward their table near the center of the room. "If you feel overwhelmed, let me know," he whispered gently. "I will be fine," she said, though her voice held a quiet tremor. "Just a lot to take in." As guests mingled, Riley caught sight of familiar faces from her old world. Executives, investors, board members. Some glanced at her briefly, their eyes widening before schooling their expressions. But none approached, none dared. Then the room shifted, or perhaps Riley did. The crowd parted slightly near the entrance, and Wyatt Kingsley walked in, tall, commanding, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo that emphasized the sharpness of his presence. His hair had been styled with a clean, deliberate touch. But what struck her most was not his appearance. It was the subtle exhaustion beneath his eyes, the kind that no amount of polish could hide. Riley's breath caught. She tried to look away, but something inside her refused. Wyatt paused briefly at the top of the staircase leading into the ballroom, scanning the room with the quiet, practiced intensity she knew so well. The moment his eyes found her, everything in his expression changed. The world seemed to hold its breath. Wyatt inhaled slowly, as though her presence struck him with the force of something he did not know how to defend against. Riley's heart tightened. She saw recognition, regret, longing, and something dangerously close to admiration flicker across his face. But he did not move toward her. He simply stared, soft, unraveling, before looking away with a tension that made her chest ache. Ethan followed her gaze and gently spoke. "Do you want to leave?" Riley blinked, gathering herself. "No, I can handle this." Ethan nodded but stayed close, protective without being possessive. Throughout the evening, Riley tried focusing on conversations and presentations, but she felt Wyatt's presence like a warm pulse in the back of her mind. Whenever she looked up, she found him somewhere nearby, watching her with a quiet gravity. He did not approach her immediately. He seemed almost afraid to invade her space. The program progressed, speeches were made, awards were presented. As Riley clapped politely, she felt the weight of suppressed emotion settling over the room like a jeweled veil. Then, during a pause between presentations, Wyatt moved. He crossed the ballroom with slow, careful steps, slipping between guests with his usual grace. Riley felt him drawing closer before she fully saw him. Ethan noticed first. "He is coming," he murmured softly. Riley steadied her breath. Wyatt stopped beside their table. "Ethan," he said with a nod, his voice smooth but restrained. "Good evening." "Good evening," Ethan replied politely, though a protective edge hovered beneath his tone. Wyatt turned toward Riley. Time thinned. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes luminous beneath the chandelier light. "Riley," he whispered, as if her name itself had become sacred. Her heart fluttered despite her resolve. "Wyatt?" He breathed in, his gaze trailing across her face, pausing briefly at her lips. "You look—" He hesitated, swallowing the word he wanted to say. "Beautiful." Riley shifted gently in her seat. "It is a formal event. Everyone looks beautiful." He shook his head faintly, the corner of his mouth tightening. "No, this is something different." Silence stretched between them, rich with unspoken memories. Ethan cleared his throat lightly. "Riley, the next segment is about to start. Should we take our seats?" Wyatt's jaw flexed imperceptibly, but his voice remained even. "May I have a moment? Only a moment." Riley hesitated, lifting her eyes to Ethan. He nodded. "I will be right here." Riley rose slowly, smoothing the fabric of her gown, and stepped a few feet away with Wyatt. The air between them hummed with quiet electricity. "Why are you here tonight?" she asked softly. "I sponsor this event every year," he replied. His expression softened. "But tonight, I came hoping to see you." Her breath trembled. "Wyatt," he stepped closer, not touching her but allowing the warmth of his presence to brush against her senses. "I am still trying to understand how I let things unravel the way they did," he murmured. "I am trying to make things right." She lifted a hand gently. "And I appreciate that. But here, in this place, I need space. This night is not yours to take from me." He nodded slowly, pain etching across his features. "Then allow me one request." Riley frowned softly. "What request?" "A dance," he whispered. Her heart stumbled. The gala music shifted into a slow, elegant waltz as couples began drifting toward the dance floor. Riley looked away, gathering courage she was not sure she possessed. "Wyatt, I do not think that is—" "Just one," he murmured, voice fragile and reverent. "Only one, and I promise not to ask again." Her breath trembled in her throat. She wanted to refuse, but she also wanted, deeply, achingly, to feel his arms around her one last time, to understand what remained between them, and whether her heart still responded to the warmth he had once offered, in silence. She glanced back at Ethan. He watched her with steady kindness, giving her a gentle nod of permission. Riley turned toward Wyatt, her pulse shimmering like candlelight. "Only one dance," she whispered. Wyatt released a breath that sounded almost like relief. He offered his hand. Riley hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her fingers in his. The contact was delicate, electric, familiar in a way that made her entire being quiver. He guided her to the floor with careful reverence, as though she was something fragile he had once broken, and now feared damaging again. The moment he placed his hand on the small of her back, Riley felt warmth spread through her like a silent confession. He drew her gently toward him, his eyes locked onto hers with a tenderness she had never seen from him. They began to move, slowly, gracefully, painfully aware of every breath they shared. "Riley," he whispered, voice brimming with emotion, "I have missed this, missed you." She closed her eyes briefly. "Please do not say things you cannot change." "I can change many things," he murmured, "except how I feel when I am near you." She trembled in his arms, her heart betraying her calm expression. "You cannot undo what happened." He brushed his thumb lightly against her waist, a barely there touch full of yearning. "I know, but I want you to know I see you differently now. I see everything I failed to appreciate." Riley met his gaze, her voice soft but firm. "Seeing me is not the same as keeping me." Wyatt's breath shook. "Then let me learn." Her eyes glimmered. Learning does not always lead to a second chance. He looked down, anguish flickering across his features. "But this dance, this moment, let it be something we do not regret." She did not answer. She simply followed the rhythm, letting the music guide her body, while her soul fought between longing and survival. When the song ended, Wyatt did not immediately release her. For a heartbeat, they remained suspended in a fragile embrace, foreheads nearly touching. "Thank you," he whispered. Riley stepped back gently, reclaiming her breath, her balance, her heart. Wyatt watched her return to Ethan's side with a look so full of longing it nearly cracked his composure, and Riley, gathering herself, allowed one truth to settle deep inside her. A single dance could awaken feelings she had tried desperately to silence, but it could not erase the pain that brought her here tonight. It could only remind her that even when the heart breaks, it remembers how to feel. Morning light crept slowly across Seattle, draping the skyline in pale gold, as though trying to soften the bruises left by the previous night's emotions. Riley Watson sat at her kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. She had barely slept. Every time she drifted into half-dreams, she felt again the warmth of Wyatt's hand on her back, the soft pressure of his fingers holding hers during their single, devastating dance. His scent, his voice, the anguish veiled behind his composed exterior. They lingered in her like an echo that refused to die. But clarity came with morning, and it whispered the truth she needed to hear. A dance did not erase a wound, a confession did not undo a betrayal, and no amount of longing could rewrite what she had lived through. The tea warmed her palms, but her chest remained tight. She placed the cup down carefully and stared out the window at the soft drizzle coating the city. The world continued onward, indifferent to heartbreak. Perhaps that indifference was a blessing. She took a deep breath. Today, she would choose herself. Across town, in the pristine glass-walled boardroom of Kingsley Technologies, Meredith Voss stood at the center of a semicircle of executives. She wore an immaculate ivory suit, her hair tied back in a sleek knot, her expression poised and unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said crisply, "we need to get ahead of yesterday's headlines." Several executives shifted nervously in their chairs. A major tech blog had released an article hinting at instability within Kingsley Technologies. Though the report avoided naming individuals, the implication was clear enough. Leadership was faltering. Wyatt Kingsley's absence from most of the gala's meetings had not gone unnoticed. Meredith clasped her hands behind her back. "We cannot afford another leak, another scandal, or another sign of weakness. We must make decisions swiftly." "And what decision is that?" one executive asked hesitantly. "That we move forward," she replied, voice smooth as steel, "with or without certain liabilities." Though she did not mention him directly, everyone understood. Meredith was positioning herself to seize power if Wyatt stumbled even slightly. Her smile was delicate, precise, and utterly ruthless. Meanwhile, Wyatt stood alone in his office, staring at the framed cityscape hanging above his sofa. His expression was tense, weary, and deeply conflicted. Last night's gala had carved an ache into him he could not shake. Seeing Riley radiant, independent, and standing beside another man had disrupted something fundamental inside him. He had once imagined himself impermeable, unshakable. Riley had shattered that illusion simply by walking away. A knock echoed softly against the glass. Samuel Greer entered, holding a tablet. "Sir, I went through the access logs again. There is more." Wyatt turned sharply. "Show me." Samuel approached and handed him the tablet. This file was accessed using Riley's credentials 15 minutes after she logged out for the day. She was nowhere near the building at that time. Wyatt's grip tightened around the device. So her credentials were stolen. Yes, and there is evidence of elevated permissions someone hid under her profile, someone with internal authority. Wyatt felt heat rise in his chest, a simmering mix of anger and guilt. "Someone framed her." Samuel nodded. "It appears so." Wyatt set the tablet down slowly, the weight of the truth settling over him like a heavy cloak. He had been wrong. Utterly, unforgivably wrong. And he had not just doubted her. He had humiliated her in front of an entire room. "Sir," Samuel said gently, "there is more. Messages circulated last night through anonymous sources suggesting Riley was dismissed for cause." Wyatt's eyes flashed dangerously. "Find out who is responsible." "I believe we already know," Samuel said quietly. "The pattern matches the tactics Meredith Voss has used in previous internal disputes." Wyatt's anger hardened into something sharp and determined. "Prepare everything. I will handle her." But before facing the traitor in his ranks, he needed to face the woman whose heart he had broken. Riley spent the afternoon at Ethan's office. His startup occupied a renovated brick building lined with large industrial windows that flooded the workspace with gentle light. Plants hung from wooden beams. Whiteboards overflowed with ideas written in different colors. The office felt alive with possibility, a stark contrast to the pristine rigidity of Kingsley Technologies. Riley walked the space with Ethan, listening as he explained the structure of their operations and the growth opportunities ahead. "We are expanding into 3 new cities by the end of the year," he said with quiet enthusiasm. "I need someone who can oversee logistics and internal alignment." "You already have a great team," Riley said humbly. "Yes," Ethan replied, looking at her meaningfully, "but none of them have your combination of structure, instinct, and empathy. You see patterns other people miss. You see people." Riley felt warmth bloom inside her chest, fragile but real. "You speak as if you already decided I belong here." "I think you do," Ethan murmured, "but I want you to feel it, not just hear it." His sincerity touched her in places she had kept closed for too long. Later that evening, after reviewing documents together, Ethan suggested a break. They walked to the rooftop terrace, where strings of soft lights hung over the wooden deck, illuminating the city below. Ethan leaned against the railing, watching her with gentle curiosity. "Tell me the truth, Riley. Are you afraid to start somewhere new?" She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her hazel eyes shimmering under the light. "I'm afraid of trusting again. Not the work, the people." Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but standing near enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. "I am not him," he said softly, "and I would never expect you to forget what he did." Riley looked down, her voice trembling faintly. "I do not want to talk about Wyatt tonight." "Then we will not," Ethan replied. "We can talk about anything you want." She offered him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you." But despite Ethan's kindness, despite the hope she felt in his offer, Riley could not stop the memory of Wyatt's voice whispering against her ear during their dance. She tried to silence it, to bury it deep beneath the promise of a new beginning. Yet the heart often remembered what the mind wished to erase. Back at Kingsley Technologies, Wyatt entered Meredith's office without knocking. She sat behind her desk, perfectly composed, reviewing financial documents with an expression of feigned disinterest. "Wyatt," she said with a practiced smile, "to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Cut the performance," he said coldly. "I know what you did." Her eyebrow arched. "You will need to be more specific." Wyatt stepped closer, his voice lowering into a dangerous whisper. "You sabotaged Riley. You framed her to get her out of the way." Meredith leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs elegantly. "I removed a liability," she said simply. "You were too blind to see how her presence affected you. She made you weak. Wyatt's jaw hardened. She made me human. That is exactly the problem, Meredith replied. This company cannot be led by someone who loses focus every time a woman breathes near him. Wyatt's eyes darkened. You will regret underestimating me, she smirked. And you will regret clinging to emotions you cannot afford. Wyatt turned on his heel and left her office without another word, but the fury burning inside him only intensified. It was not just about betrayal. It was not even about his company. It was about Riley, her truth, her dignity, her heart. He stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. He typed a message, this one raw and unpolished. Riley, please, I need to see you. Not as your former boss. As the man who hurt you and needs to make it right. Wyatt. He stared at the message, then hit send. Riley felt her phone buzz in her coat pocket that evening as she walked home from Ethan's office. She stepped beneath a lamppost illuminated by a halo of soft golden light and lifted her phone cautiously. Her breath stilled as she read Wyatt's words. The man who hurt you and needs to make it right. Her heart wavered, torn between the ache she had carried and the strength she fought to reclaim. She closed her eyes, her fingers trembling gently. She typed back, Wyatt, if you want to talk, meet me tomorrow at the pier. At 3. Riley. A surge of emotion rushed through her as she hit send, fear mingling with hope and unresolved longing. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of reassurance. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, I am stronger now. As she continued walking, rain drifted softly around her, the city glowing like a promise she had yet to understand. And somewhere across Seattle, Wyatt Kingsley read her message with a mixture of relief and terror. The meeting she had agreed to was not a second chance. It was an ultimatum his heart could not afford to fail. The afternoon sky over Elliott Bay stretched in shades of soft silver, the clouds drifting low, as if trying to kiss the surface of the quiet water. A cool breeze carried the scent of sea salt and rain, fluttering through the pier's weathered wooden planks. It was a delicate hour, suspended between daylight and dusk, where emotions found room to breathe. Riley stood at the edge of the pier, her coat wrapped tightly around her as she gazed at the gentle ripples spreading across the bay. She had arrived 10 minutes early, her heart pulsing with a mixture of apprehension and unspoken longing. The stillness around her felt like a fragile haven, but it did nothing to quiet the storm inside. She touched the collar of her coat, steadying herself. She had chosen strength today, yet strength did not erase uncertainty. It only helped her endure it. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, reminding herself that this meeting would not define her worth. It was simply a step she needed to take to reclaim her voice. Footsteps approached from behind, slow, heavy, familiar. Riley opened her eyes and turned. Wyatt Kingsley walked toward her, the wind tousling a few strands of his dark hair. He wore a black wool coat over a charcoal sweater, his posture straight, but his expression carrying a vulnerability she had never seen fully exposed. His blue-grey eyes found hers, with an intensity softened by remorse. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Wyatt stopped a few steps away, his breath visible in the cool air. "Thank you for meeting me." Riley nodded quietly. "You asked. I listened. But that does not mean this is easy." He lowered his head, acknowledging her truth. "I did not expect it to be." A wave crashed gently beneath the pier. The faint cry of a seagull echoed overhead. Wyatt stepped closer, but not too close, giving her the space she needed. "Riley," he began, his voice low and careful, "I want to explain what I found. I owe you that. You owe me honesty," she corrected softly. "Start there." Wyatt drew a slow breath. "The logs were altered. Your credentials were used when you were not even in the building. Someone deliberately manipulated access records to point to you." Riley's lips parted in surprise, though part of her had sensed something was wrong all along. "Do you know who did it?" His jaw tightened. "Yes, and I am dealing with it." His eyes flashed with something sharp, something protective, but he forced himself to soften again. "But what matters right now is you." Riley looked down at the boards beneath her feet. "What matters is that when you saw my name on that report, you believed it. You believed I could betray you." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I did not want to believe it, but you did," she whispered. Wyatt closed his eyes briefly, his regret palpable. "I panicked. The board was breathing down my neck. Investors were threatening to pull out. I felt everything slipping through my fingers." His voice broke slightly. "And instead of trusting the one person who has never failed me, I pushed you away." Riley's throat tightened. "I gave you years of my life. I carried burdens you never even saw. How could you think I would ever be careless with something that mattered to you?" Wyatt's breath caught. "Because I was careless with something that mattered even more." Riley looked up sharply. He held her gaze with raw honesty. "You." Her heart trembled at the confession. She forced herself to look away, gripping the railing as if grounding herself against a tide, threatening to pull her under. Wyatt approached slowly, stopping at her side. "Riley," he murmured, "there is so much I need to say." She inhaled shakily. "Then say it." For a moment he simply looked at her. The woman who had supported him challenged him and unknowingly reshaped the walls he once thought impenetrable. Her hair moved softly in the breeze, catching a ray of muted sunlight. Her profile held the grace of someone who had endured pain without letting it harden her. "I have been blind," he whispered, "blind to your worth, to your loyalty, to the way you anchored every part of my life. I was so focused on holding everything together that I never realized you were the one holding me." Riley felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. "Do not mistake dependence for affection." Wyatt reached out slowly, carefully, until his fingers brushed hers. The contact was feather-light, filled with a desperate tenderness. "This is not dependence," he said softly. "This is something I cannot name without feeling like the words are still too small." Her breath trembled, her pulse racing beneath her calm exterior. "Wyatt," she whispered, "why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "that losing you has been the hardest truth I have ever faced. Harder than stepping down from a deal, harder than any scandal, harder than any failure." Riley stared at him, bewildered by the sincerity she had waited years to hear but had given up believing would ever come. He moved closer, his hand lifting slowly, giving her every chance to step away. When she did not, he gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm despite the cold breeze. Riley's eyes fluttered shut, her breath catching at the tenderness that poured from his fingertips. "Look at me," Wyatt whispered. She opened her eyes, and their gazes locked, storm meeting fire, longing confronting truth. "You deserved someone who fought for you," he said, voice low and aching, "and instead, I became the man who wounded you." Her lips parted, trembling. "Why did you choose fear over me?" Wyatt's thumb brushed her cheek gently. "Because I never learned to trust anything I could not control. But you were the one thing I never wanted to control, and that terrified me." Riley shook her head faintly. "Fear cannot be the foundation of anything healthy." "I know," he murmured, "which is why I am not asking for anything except the chance to stand before you with nothing hidden." She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. "I am not ready to forgive you." "I am not asking for forgiveness," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am asking for truth, yours and mine." Riley exhaled shakily. "Then tell me why it hurt you to see me with Ethan." Wyatt's expression tightened. He swallowed slowly. "Because I saw you smile in a way you never smiled with me. Because he made you feel safe. Because I realized that another man could offer you peace, while I had only offered you storms." He paused, voice thickening, "And it killed me to think that I had no one to blame but myself." Riley felt her heart swell with a complicated mix of sorrow and longing. "Ethan is kind," she whispered. "He supports me, and I envy him for that," Wyatt said with painful honesty. Because I wish I had been the man who protected you instead of the one who broke you." Silence wrapped around them, heavy and intimate. Riley turned slightly toward him, searching his face as though reading the spaces between his words. "Wyatt," she murmured, "what do you want from me?" He stepped closer until the distance between them vanished into shared breath. "I want one thing," he whispered, "a chance to make things right. Not for the company, not for redemption, for you." Her eyes glistened. "And what if I cannot give you that chance?" He nodded gently. "Then I will walk away, but not before you know the truth of what you mean to me." Riley's lips trembled as she whispered, "And what do I mean to you, Wyatt?" He lowered his forehead to hers, not touching yet, hovering in that fragile space where emotion turned into something sacred. "You are the first person who ever saw me," he murmured, "and the only one I've not been able to forget." Her breath hitched. Wyatt's next words came out like a confession decades overdue. "I care for you, Riley, more deeply than I have ever allowed myself to care for anything real." Riley felt the world tilt around her, her heart pounding with a force she had tried to silence for too long. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it over Wyatt's, still cupping her cheek. His breath faltered at her touch. "Why do you say these things now?" she whispered. "Because losing you forced me to face everything I never had the courage to feel." Riley closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the warmth of his confession. When she opened them again, her voice trembled. "I cannot promise you anything." Wyatt nodded softly. "I would not ask for promises, only honesty." She hesitated, then whispered, "Then here is mine. A part of me still wants to trust you, and another part is terrified." Wyatt's thumb stroked her cheek, slow and reverent. "Then let me earn the part that is willing." Before she could respond, he leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead gently against hers. The moment carried a depth so intimate, it felt like a vow whispered at the edge of breaking. Riley placed her other hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Wyatt," she breathed, "you cannot rush this." He nodded, breath warm against her lips. "I will move at your pace, even if it breaks me." Her eyes softened at his sincerity. She stepped back slowly, though her hand lingered against his chest for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. When she finally withdrew it, Wyatt's expression softened into something raw and grateful. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked quietly. "For not walking away before hearing me." Riley looked at the bay, its surface shimmering in the fading light. "I did not come here for closure," she said softly. "I came to understand whether the man who hurt me could also heal me." Wyatt's breath trembled. "And can he?" She looked up at him, her eyes searching, shimmering, undecided. "I do not know," she whispered. "But you took the first step tonight." Wyatt's expression filled with reverent hope, fragile but alive. Riley wrapped her coat tighter around her, feeling the chill of evening deepen. "I should go," she murmured. Wyatt nodded. "May I walk you to your car?" She hesitated, then nodded softly. "Yes, you may." They walked side by side along the pier, their shoulders brushing occasionally, sending soft shocks of longing through both of them. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. When they reached her car, Riley turned to him, her hazel eyes glowing with a quiet vulnerability. "Good night, Wyatt." He stepped closer but kept his hands at his sides, his restraint tender and deliberate. "Good night, Riley." She opened her car door, paused, and looked at him one last time. "Thank you for being honest," she whispered. Wyatt's voice was low, filled with emotion he could no longer hide. "Thank you for letting me try." Riley slipped into her car and drove away with her heart trembling. Wyatt remained standing under the faint glow of the street lamp, watching her disappear down the quiet road. The wind tousled his hair, the cool air brushing against him like a reminder of the fragile miracle that had just unfolded. For the first time since losing her, he felt the smallest spark of hope, a hope born not of promises but of truth shared in the tender quiet of the pier. The next morning arrived wrapped in a pale gold haze, the sun rising slowly through a soft curtain of mist that covered Seattle like a tender veil. Riley awoke before her alarm, lying still beneath her covers while the quiet of dawn filled her apartment. Her heart felt full and unsettled at once, as though carrying a fragile secret it did not yet know how to hold. The memory of Wyatt's forehead, resting so delicately against hers at the pier, drifted back to her, warm and bittersweet. His confession, trembling with vulnerability, still echoed in her chest. Riley pressed her hand over her heart, as if trying to steady its rhythm. She had not forgiven him. She was not certain she could. But last night had revealed something undeniable. The man who hurt her was not the same man, now trying to rebuild what he had shattered. She sat up slowly, pushing the blankets aside, and moved to the window. The bay glittered faintly in the distance, its surface painted in soft strokes of pink and silver. The world felt quieter today, though her emotions hummed beneath her skin like a song she could not silence. Her phone buzzed once. A message. From Ethan. Riley. Team meeting at 11. Hope you can make it. After yesterday, I want you involved in the new project. Ethan. She smiled gently. Ethan had been her anchor through the worst days, offering steadiness when her world crumbled. He never concealed his admiration for her, yet never demanded anything in return. His patience was a refuge she appreciated deeply. She typed back, I will be there. Thank you for thinking of me. Riley. She dressed in soft neutrals, a cream sweater and tailored trousers, her hair falling naturally around her shoulders. She took her time with her makeup, adding just enough warmth to her cheeks to feel put together without hiding the exhaustion resting beneath her eyes. As she prepared to leave, she hesitated, her hand hovering over her phone. She did not expect a message from Wyatt this early, but some part of her wondered. Not receiving one made her heart ache in ways she did not want to name. At Kingsley Technologies, the morning unfolded in a storm of tension and urgency. Wyatt arrived 20 minutes earlier than usual, stepping through the glass doors with a focus that reverberated through the building. He wore a deep navy suit and a dark coat, his expression honed into a blend of determination and quiet turmoil. Samuel Greer followed closely behind him. Sir, the board meeting begins in 2 hours. They want clarification on the internal breach. They will have it, Wyatt replied. But first I need to finalize the investigation report. Samuel glanced at him, concern flickering in his eyes. And Miss Voss, Wyatt's jaw tightened. Her time manipulating this company ends today. He continued walking, though his steps slowed slightly as they passed the hallway leading to his old private office assistant station. The empty desk, once humming with Riley's quiet diligence, stood still like a haunting memory. Wyatt paused, staring at the neatly arranged surface. She kept everything in perfect order, he murmured, voice barely audible. Samuel nodded. She did. Wyatt looked away, the ache in his chest deepening. I need to fix what I broke, Samuel. Then you will, Samuel replied calmly, but Wyatt was not sure, not anymore. At 11 sharp, Riley arrived at Ethan's office. The atmosphere was lively as usual, filled with the warm hum of collaborative energy. Ethan waved her over from a table where several team members had gathered. There she is, he said with a genuine smile. Our newest strategist, I hope. Riley laughed softly. I am still thinking about it. Well, think in good company, he replied. We need your insight for our upcoming launch in Portland. The meeting went smoothly. Riley listened, took notes, offered suggestions. Her voice carried confidence. Her ideas sparked appreciation. Being valued for her mind felt refreshing after months of being overshadowed by Wyatt's demands and the constant pressure of perfection. But just as the meeting was wrapping up, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. Wyatt Kingsley. Her pulse quickened. Riley, I know you have every reason to ignore this message, but I wanted to thank you for yesterday. I meant every word. If you are willing, I would like to see you again. Not to ask anything of you, but because talking to you feels like the first honest thing I have done in a long time. Wyatt. Riley inhaled slowly, her heart fluttering. Ethan noticed her expression shift. Everything all right? She hesitated. Yes, just something unexpected. He studied her carefully. From him. Riley's silence answered the question. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, though he kept his tone gentle. You do not owe him anything. I know, Riley replied softly. But closure is complicated. Ethan nodded reluctantly. Just make sure he does not hurt you again. Riley offered him a grateful smile. Thank you, Ethan. But deep inside, her emotions twined in a tangled knot she was not ready to unravel. That evening, after a long day of work, Riley found herself walking along Alki Beach. The air was crisp, carrying hints of sea spray and the distant aroma of beachside cafes. Waves rolled softly toward the shore, their rhythmic whisper calming her thoughts. Lights sparkled across the bay, painting a glowing path toward downtown Seattle. Riley pulled her coat closer and let the quiet soothe her. Then she heard footsteps behind her, slow, purposeful, familiar in a way that made her breath catch. She turned. Wyatt stood a few steps away, as though afraid to intrude on her solitude. He looked different tonight, more fragile, more human. His coat was unbuttoned, his hair slightly tousled by the wind, his expression filled with the weight of everything he carried. Riley, he said gently, I should have asked before coming, but I hoped you might be here. She blinked in surprise. How did you know? He gave a small, hesitant smile. You once mentioned that this was your favorite place to clear your mind. I remembered. The admission warmed her unexpectedly. She looked away. I thought you would be busy with the investigation. I am, he replied, but not too busy to see you, not anymore. Riley's heart stumbled, though she kept her voice steady. Wyatt, why are you here? He stepped closer, the wind brushing their coats together. Because today was difficult, and I realized something important. What did you realize? She asked softly. That strength does not come from carrying everything alone, he said quietly. It comes from having someone you trust enough to share the weight. Riley's breath caught. And you think I should be that person? No, Wyatt said, shaking his head. I think you are the only person who ever was. The confession wrapped itself around her heart, tender and vulnerable. She swallowed carefully. You cannot expect things to return to what they were. I do not want them to return to what they were, he said, stepping closer until the distance between them shrank into a delicate tension. I want something different, honest, equal, real. Wind brushed her hair across her cheek, and Wyatt lifted a hand slowly, waiting for her permission. When she did not step back, he gently tucked the strand behind her ear. His fingertips grazed her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. Riley, he whispered, what I said last night was only the beginning. You deserve someone who fights for you, and if you let me, I want to be that man. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. I do not know if I can trust you yet. Then let me earn your trust one day at a time, he murmured. She looked at him for a long moment, her pulse fluttering like fragile wings. The wind shifted, carrying the warmth of his presence to her. She could feel the sincerity radiating from him, raw and unguarded. Wyatt, she whispered, I am afraid. He stepped even closer, his voice soft and trembling. So am I. But being afraid with you feels less terrifying than being safe without you. The words broke something inside her. Riley felt tears prick at her eyes. She reached up slowly, placing her hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath his coat. Wyatt inhaled sharply at her touch. I do not want promises, she murmured. I want actions. You will have them, he whispered. Every one. Their gazes locked, full of longing and hesitation, and something tender growing between the fractures of their past. He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead gently against hers. His breath mingled with hers, warm in the cool evening air. They stood there for several fragile seconds, two wounded hearts learning how to beat again. Riley pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Walk with me, she said softly. Wyatt nodded, his expression filled with quiet hope. Anywhere. They walked along the shoreline, their hands brushing occasionally, each touch a spark, each silence a conversation of its own. The moon rose slowly above the water, casting a silver path across the waves as if lighting the way for them. For the first time in months, Riley felt a fragile opening in her chest. Not forgiveness, not surrender, but possibility. And Wyatt, walking beside her with reverent caution, felt something too. A beginning he had never allowed himself to hope for. A beginning he would do anything to protect. Seattle welcomed the new day with a veil of pale morning light, stretching softly across the skyline and turning the bay into a canvas of muted blues and shimmering silver. Riley stepped outside her apartment with her coat wrapped around her and her heart balanced delicately between hope and caution. The breeze carried the faint scent of sea air, mingling with the early aroma of roasted coffee drifting from a nearby cafe. She walked slowly toward the pier, replaying every moment from the night before, Wyatt's words trembling with sincerity, his forehead resting against hers in quiet devotion, his voice promising change, not with ambition, but with humility. She had not expected the depth of emotion he revealed. She had not expected the softness in his eyes, or the way his presence no longer felt like a storm threatening to swallow her, but like warmth returning to a place she had forgotten inside herself. Still, her heart trembled. Fear and longing danced together inside her with every step she took. Her phone buzzed. A message from Wyatt. "Riley, if you are free later, I would like to see you again. No expectations. Just us talking." Wyatt. The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. No demands, no assumption, just an invitation. She pressed the phone to her chest for a moment, closing her eyes. She typed a reply, "I will let you know." Riley. At Kingsley Technologies, tension rippled through the corridors like a hidden current. Employees exchanged glances as rumors swirled about internal chaos, about a breach, about shifting power behind closed doors. Wyatt entered the boardroom with quiet, controlled determination. He wore a charcoal suit and a white shirt, his expression calm but resolute. Meredith Voss stood near the windows, poised in an ivory blouse and sharp black trousers, her arms crossed as though she owned the air around her. "Wyatt," she said, tilting her head, "you look tense. Could it be because the board is losing confidence in your leadership?" He ignored her jab completely. "Let us begin." One by one, the members of the board arrived, taking their seats at the long, polished table. The atmosphere pulsed with anticipation. Wyatt remained standing. "As you know," he began, his tone firm yet steady, "there has been a breach within our internal systems. I now have evidence showing that the breach was not an external threat, nor was it caused by negligence." A murmur swept across the room. "It was orchestrated from within," Wyatt continued, "specifically by someone trying to frame my former executive assistant, Riley Watson." Meredith let out a soft, mocking breath. "Wyatt, this is unnecessary dramatics. Even for you." He finally turned, meeting her gaze with unwavering, quiet fire. "I have the logs, I have the altered credentials, and I have the timestamps that place you in the restricted server room on the night of the breach." Whispers erupted. Meredith's jaw tightened, but she held onto her composure with sharp, brittle pride. "You cannot prove that." "I can," Wyatt replied, "and I will." Samuel Greer stepped forward, placing a folder in front of Meredith. "These are our findings," he said calmly. Meredith's eyes darted across the documents, the color draining from her face. Her fingers trembled just slightly, though she forced them still. She lifted her chin with a last attempt at control. "This is not over," she whispered venomously. Wyatt's voice softened, though not with sympathy, with finality. "It is over. Your access has been revoked, and your termination is effective immediately." Her eyes widened, fury and disbelief mixing inside them. "You are making a mistake." "No," Wyatt said quietly. "I am correcting one. Security escorted her out. The board members remained silent, watching Wyatt with a mixture of apprehension and respect as he sat down. "We will rebuild from here," he said, "with integrity." And though he did not show it, beneath the polished exterior his heart raced, not from the victory, but from the knowledge that everything he had done was driven by a single truth. He wanted to be the man Riley deserved. Later that afternoon, Riley sat in a small cafe overlooking the waterfront. She stirred her tea absently, her thoughts drifting between the potential future Ethan offered and the fragile, blooming possibility with Wyatt. Her emotions felt like a painting still drying, vibrant, layered, delicate. She needed clarity. She needed answers from her own heart. Just then, her phone vibrated again. A second message from Wyatt. "Riley, I understand if you need space, but I am heading to Volunteer Park tonight, the conservatory at sunset. That is where you once told me you felt calm. If you come, I will be grateful. If not, I will still be grateful you listened last night." Wyatt. Her breath shuddered. The conservatory. A place of quiet beauty, filled with orchids, ferns, and sunlight filtered through old glass panes. A place she had loved for years, but had never shared with anyone until Wyatt. Slowly, she typed one word. "Okay, Riley." As evening approached, she walked toward the conservatory with steady steps. The sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in apricot and rose-gold hues. The glass structure glowed softly, its warm light spilling onto the path like a silent welcome. Inside, the humid air embraced her with the scent of blooming jasmine and warm earth. Lantern-style lights illuminated the leaves, creating shadows that moved gently with the breeze. Wyatt stood near a cluster of orchids, his hands in his pockets, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability. He looked almost unreal amid the flowers and soft light, as though the space itself softened him. When he saw her, he exhaled a breath he had clearly been holding for hours. "Riley," he said, his voice low with emotion. "You came." She stepped closer. "I am here." Wyatt swallowed, taking a moment to gather himself. "Thank you." Riley looked around, letting the quiet beauty of the place steady her. "You remembered, this is where I feel most at peace." "I remember everything you ever told me," he admitted softly. Her breath trembled. Wyatt moved toward her with slow, careful steps, stopping when he was close enough for her to feel his warmth, but not so close as to overwhelm her. His voice dropped into a whisper. "Riley, last night I wasn't only honest. I was terrified. Terrified you would walk away before I could say everything I should have said years ago." Riley felt tears pressing behind her eyes. "Then say it now." Wyatt looked directly into her eyes, his voice unsteady. "You changed me. Not with grand gestures, not with demands, but with your steady presence. Your truth, your patience. You were the one constant in my chaos, and I never realized how much that meant until I lost you." Her heart tightened painfully. "You did not lose me," she whispered. "You hurt me." "I know," he replied, anguish softening his words, "and I cannot take that back. But I can tell you that every step I take now is because of what you showed me, what you taught me." Riley's voice trembled. "And what is that?" He took a breath that shook through him. "That strength is gentler than I thought. That vulnerability is not weakness. And that caring for someone is not a liability. It is what makes everything else worth fighting for." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She brushed them away, but Wyatt reached forward gently, letting his thumb touch the edge of her jaw. His fingers trembled, as if aware of the privilege of touching her again. "Riley," he whispered, "I want to be the man who protects your peace instead of breaking it." Her chest ached with emotion. "I do not know if I can trust you," she said softly. "I will earn it," he replied, voice breaking with sincerity. "One day at a time, with actions, not words." Their eyes locked, longing, fear, tenderness, and truth swirling between them like a fragile flame. She moved closer, her voice barely audible. "Why does it feel like you see me differently now?" He inhaled deeply. "Because I finally allowed myself to. Silence wrapped around them, beautiful and fragile. Riley placed her hand gently on his chest. His heartbeat quickened beneath her palm. His gaze softened into something she had never seen so clearly before, something reverent, something full. "Wyatt," she whispered, "tell me why you want me in your life." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingertips light as breath. "Because you are the only person whose absence feels like silence and whose presence feels like home." Emotions surged through her like warm light, breaking through long shadows. She took another step forward until the fragile space between them dissolved. Wyatt lowered his forehead gently to hers, their breaths mingling, the moment trembling with restraint and longing. "Riley," he whispered, "I care for you. Deeply, honestly, completely." Her lips parted in a trembling breath. "I care for you too," she whispered, "but I am afraid of falling again." "Then fall slowly," he murmured. "With me." Her heart cracked open, not with pain this time, but with possibility. She wrapped her arms around him softly, resting her head against his chest. Wyatt closed his eyes and held her carefully, reverently, as though he feared breaking the fragile miracle she had offered him. They stayed like that for a long moment, surrounded by orchids glowing under the warm lights, the conservatory breathing around them like a sanctuary built just for two souls, learning how to speak again. And for the first time, Riley felt that maybe, just maybe, her heart could heal in the arms of the man who once shattered it. Not because he asked for forgiveness, but because he finally understood what loving her required. Seattle awakened beneath a sky brushed with lavender and gold, as if dawn itself wished to offer a blessing upon the fragile hope Riley carried in her chest. After leaving the conservatory the previous night, she had walked home slowly, replaying every word Wyatt whispered, every tremor in his voice, every hesitant touch that revealed a man stripped of armor and finally made human. She had felt the truth of him, raw and unhidden, blooming between the orchids like something sacred. But morning light always brought clarity, and Riley knew her journey with Wyatt required more than emotions. It required certainty. She dressed in a pale rose blouse and a soft grey coat, colours that made her feel calm and grounded. As she brushed her hair, she caught her reflection in the mirror, her hazel eyes glimmering with both strength and vulnerability. She barely recognized the woman who had shown up at the pier days earlier, weighed down by betrayal and silence. Now she stood with a quiet dignity that felt new, but also deeply hers. Her phone buzzed gently. A message from Wyatt. "Riley, I will be at the office today working through the aftermath of the investigation. If you have time, I would like to see you this evening. Only if your heart feels ready. Wyatt." She pressed the phone to her chest, breathing in slowly. Then she typed back, "Let us talk tonight. Riley." At Kingsley Technologies, the storm Meredith had left behind was already being cleared. Security protocols were rewritten, systems restored, and Samuel Greer stood in Wyatt's office reviewing the final report. "It is complete," Samuel said, placing the folder on the desk. "Riley's name is officially cleared. The board accepted your findings. They also approved your restructuring plan." Wyatt exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. His office felt different today, lighter almost, as though removing the corruption within the walls made the space breathe again. "Thank you," he murmured. Samuel hesitated before speaking again. "Sir, do you plan to offer Miss Watson her position back?" Wyatt shook his head immediately. "Her worth is greater than the desk she sat behind. She deserves more than being my assistant again, much more. And she must choose freely without obligation." Samuel nodded. "Then may tonight go well." Wyatt looked toward the large windows, watching the city stretch endlessly beneath him. "Tonight, I will tell her everything, and accept whatever she decides." Meanwhile, Riley spent the day navigating her growing responsibilities at Ethan's company. After the morning meeting, Ethan approached her with a hopeful smile. "I have been thinking about last night," he began, "about how your presence has changed the way this team functions." Riley glanced up from her notes. Ethan, he shook his head gently. I am not asking for anything. I know your heart is complicated right now. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, this place will always welcome you. She offered him a warm, appreciative smile. You have been a generous friend. A shadow crossed Ethan's expression, but he nodded. I hope I remain one. The unspoken truth hung softly between them. That afternoon, after reviewing project details and brainstorming sessions, Riley returned home to prepare for the evening. She chose a simple, soft blue dress that draped elegantly yet comfortably, its flowing lines matching her desire for peace rather than spectacle. She let her hair fall loosely around her shoulders, adding a touch of gloss to her lips. When she stepped outside, twilight was descending over the city. The air held the crisp, sweet scent of rain from earlier in the day, and lights flickered across skyscrapers like tiny, glowing promises. Wyatt had suggested meeting at a small rooftop garden overlooking the city, a place few knew existed. Riley had been there once, years ago, when Wyatt had held a late-night meeting with investors. The garden was hidden, intimate, quiet. She arrived by elevator, stepping out into the cool evening air. Lanterns hung in delicate patterns around the garden, illuminating the lush greenery and the small stone path that wound between rose bushes and soft patches of lavender. Wyatt stood near the railing, his hands in his pockets, his expression drawn with anticipation and something far deeper. He wore a deep grey coat over a black sweater, his hair tousled slightly by the breeze. When he turned and saw her, his breath visibly caught. "Riley," he whispered, as though the word itself carried reverence. She stepped toward him, her heartbeat fluttering. "Wyatt." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The city stretched behind them, but the world felt small, just two hearts suspended in a fragile, trembling space. Wyatt approached slowly. "Thank you for coming." "I needed to," she said softly. "I needed to hear the rest." He swallowed gently, his gaze never leaving her. "Then I will not hide anything." He motioned toward a small wooden bench beneath a trellis of flowering vines. They sat facing one another, their knees almost touching. The night air wrapped around them gently. Wyatt began in a low voice. "Riley, everything that happened at Kingsley Technologies has been corrected. The board knows you were innocent. The public will not hear your name tied to the breach again." Relief washed over her features, though her voice carried a quiet tremor. "Thank you for making that right." Wyatt shook his head. "I did not do it as a favor. I did it because you deserved nothing less than justice." She looked down, clasping her hands on her lap. "And what about you, Wyatt? What do you deserve?" He leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Whatever you decide I deserve." Her breath hitched. Wyatt continued, softer now. "Riley, I have spent years building walls around myself so tall I could barely see over them. You climbed them without knowing you were doing it. You reached the parts of me I had forgotten existed, and when I pushed you away, when I believed lies instead of trusting you, I broke something inside both of us." Riley closed her eyes briefly. Wyatt reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers with the gentlest touch, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. "I want to earn your trust again," he whispered. "Not with promises, with consistency, with openness. With quiet moments like this, where I speak truth instead of letting fear speak for me." Riley opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a soft, cautious tenderness. "I need to know something. Anything," he murmured. "When you look at me now, is it because you miss what I gave you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Or because you see me for who I am?" Wyatt drew her hand into his, intertwining their fingers slowly. "I see you," he whispered. "Your strength, your patience, your brilliance, your heart, and I miss everything about you because I finally understand what I lost." Emotion shimmered across her face. She felt his sincerity in every syllable, but the wound inside her still pulsed. "Wyatt," she whispered, "I want to believe you, but part of me is still afraid." He lifted her hand gently to his chest, pressing her palm over his heartbeat. It thudded rapidly beneath her fingers. "So am I," he said softly. "But maybe fear is not a sign to run away. Maybe it is a sign of what is worth fighting for." Her breath trembled at the warmth of him, at the intimacy of such a fragile confession. She asked quietly, "What are you fighting for?" "You," he whispered without hesitation. "Not the assistant you once were, not the woman I depended on without appreciating. You, Riley Watson, as you are now." Her heart swelled painfully. Before she could speak, Wyatt leaned forward very slowly, bringing his forehead to hers, just as he had done at the pier and in the conservatory. The gentle contact sent a warm rush through her entire being. His breath mingled with hers in a tender, trembling rhythm. "Riley," he murmured, barely audible, "tell me what your heart wants. Not your fear, not your memory, your heart." She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. "My heart," she whispered, voice breaking, "wants to trust you again." Wyatt's own eyes glistened. "Then let me show you how." She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his, seeing no walls, no calculation, no coldness, only longing, only truth. She lifted her free hand and cupped his cheek gently, her thumb brushing the stubble along his jaw. He exhaled sharply, leaning into her touch with reverence. "Wyatt," she whispered, "I am choosing hope. Not certainty, not promises. Hope." His voice trembled. "Hope is enough. Hope is everything." She took a deep breath. Then, with delicate slowness, she leaned closer until her lips brushed his cheek. The faintest kiss. Soft, warm, fragile. It was not a declaration. It was permission. Wyatt closed his eyes, emotion rippling through him. He lifted her hand from his cheek and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, slow and reverent. "Riley," he whispered, "this moment, this is the beginning I prayed for and never believed I deserved." She felt her heart open, trembling with tenderness. He slipped an arm carefully around her waist, guiding her closer until she rested quietly against his chest. His embrace was gentle, protective, full of a devotion he no longer hid. Riley allowed herself to melt into the warmth of him, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat align with her own. They stayed like that beneath the lantern glow, the rooftop garden surrounding them in soft, fragrant stillness. Not lovers yet, not a perfect ending, but two souls finally speaking the same truth. When Riley finally lifted her head to look at him, their faces were inches apart. Wyatt brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers trembling at the fragile joy that filled him. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked softly. "For giving me another chance to earn your heart." Riley smiled, a small, luminous smile that reached her eyes. "Do not waste it." Wyatt pulled her into another gentle embrace, the kind that promised patience, tenderness, and constancy. And as the night deepened around them, Riley felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Peace. The kind found not in perfection, but in truth. The kind found not in certainty, but in the courage to begin again. 10 years later, Seattle glowed beneath a warm summer sun, its skyline taller, its rhythm faster, its people shaped by a world more connected than ever. Technology had leapt forward in ways no one could have predicted, weaving itself even deeper into daily life. Yet amid all that change, some things endured untouched. The shimmer of Elliott Bay at sunset, the scent of rain lingering on the wind, and the quiet, steady beating of two hearts that had learned to grow together. At the Kingsley Watson Innovation Campus, a sprawling complex of glass and gardens overlooking the water, a crowd gathered for the 10-year anniversary of the foundation Riley and Wyatt had built from the ashes of their past. Children ran across the green lawns as adults mingled near white tents adorned with soft lighting and flowers. Laughter rose into the warm air, music drifted from the stage. The campus, once a bold dream, had become a sanctuary for young entrepreneurs, underserved students, and marginalized communities seeking opportunity. Riley's vision and Wyatt's resources had become a partnership that changed lives far beyond their own. Near the edge of the park, beneath a canopy of blooming dogwoods, Riley Watson Kingsley adjusted the collar of her soft blue dress as she watched the festivities unfold. Her hair, now a touch longer, shimmered under the sunlight, and fine lines around her eyes only made her smile warmer, more lived in, more beautiful. She felt arms slip gently around her waist from behind. "Found you," Wyatt murmured against her ear, his voice deeper than it had been 10 years earlier, touched with maturity and a tenderness he never lost. Riley leaned back into him, her heart finding its familiar home. "You always do." Wyatt kissed her temple softly and rested his chin on her shoulder. He wore a navy suit without a tie, the top buttons of his shirt open, proof he no longer hid behind rigidity or perfection. Time had softened him in all the right ways. His eyes held fewer shadows, his posture less guarded. He was still powerful, still admired, still the visionary the world looked to, but with Riley, he was simply a man in love. Nearby, 2 children chased butterflies across the grass. Their daughter, Emma, 8 years old, wore a white sundress and a crown of tiny daisies Riley had woven for her. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Their son, Lucas, 5 and endlessly curious, ran behind her with a net twice his size, determined to catch something he would set free the moment he held it. Wyatt watched them, a soft smile touching his lips. "Did you ever imagine this?" he whispered. Riley placed her hand over his. "Not then. But now, it feels like it was always meant to be." They stood in silence, absorbing the sweetness of the moment. A decade earlier, they had rebuilt themselves slowly, with patience and intention. Wyatt had learned to lead with transparency. Riley had learned to trust again, not blindly, but with a heart strengthened by experience. Their love had not been effortless. It had been earned, tested, honed in fire, and because of that, it had endured. Nearby, Samuel Greer approached, a little older, a little greyer, but with the same steady presence he'd offered Wyatt for years. He carried a small folder. "Wyatt, everything is finalized for the scholarship announcements." He paused, smiling warmly at Riley. "And Miss Watson," he corrected himself quickly, "Mrs. Kingsley, your outreach initiative exceeded expectations again." Riley returned the smile. "Thank you, Samuel, for everything you've done all these years." Samuel dipped his head respectfully. "My pleasure. It has been an honor working beside both of you." As he walked away, Riley's expression softened. "He deserves so much happiness. I hope he finds it." "Maybe he already has," Wyatt said gently. "He never said it. But I think this foundation became his legacy too." Riley nodded. Society had changed in 10 years. The tech world had shifted away from ruthless ambition toward ethical innovation. Transparency and accountability were no longer optional, they were demanded. And one of the major catalysts of that shift had been the scandal Meredith Voss unleashed years earlier. Riley's gaze drifted momentarily, remembering. Meredith had paid a high price for her actions. After her termination, the investigation deepened, uncovering a pattern of manipulation stretching far beyond Riley. She faced legal consequences, public scrutiny, and professional exile. Over time, her name became a cautionary tale in business schools, a reminder that brilliance without integrity always crumbles. Riley had once thought she would carry bitterness forever. But now, 10 years later, she felt only distance from the woman who once tried to destroy her. "Do you ever think of her?" Riley asked quietly. Wyatt wrapped his arms tighter around her. "Only as a lesson, not as a shadow." Riley nodded, grateful. Just then Emma ran over, out of breath and glowing with excitement. "Mom! Dad! Look!" She opened her hands to show a small white butterfly perched delicately on her palm. Riley knelt beside her daughter, brushing a curl from her cheek. "She trusts you," Emma giggled. "I think she likes me." Wyatt smiled warmly. How could she not? Lucas arrived moments later, tripping over his own feet and tumbling into Wyatt's arms with all the enthusiasm in his tiny body. Wyatt laughed, hoisting him up effortlessly. "Daddy, I almost caught a dragonfly," Lucas announced proudly. "Almost is the first step," Wyatt said, tapping his nose. The four of them stood together for a brief, perfect moment. Children laughing, parents smiling, sunlight shimmering around them as though blessing their little circle of love. Riley rose and took Wyatt's hand. "Remember when we thought we might never speak again?" she asked softly. Wyatt intertwined their fingers. "And now I cannot imagine a day without you." She looked at him tenderly. "Our beginning was painful, Wyatt, but our ending is beautiful." He cupped her face gently, brushing his thumb along her cheek just as he had done so many years ago when everything between them was new and delicate. "No," he whispered, "this is not an ending. This is our forever." She leaned into his touch, her heart swelling. Music from the stage began to play, a soft romantic melody that drifted across the garden. Without hesitation, Wyatt extended his hand. "Dance with me," he murmured. Riley laughed softly. With all these people watching, he stepped closer, lowering his voice to the intimate tone she knew too well. "I have waited 10 years to dance with my wife in front of the world." Emotion flooded her eyes. She placed her hand in his. Wyatt drew her into his arms, guiding her into a slow, tender dance beneath the lantern-lit sky. Their children twirled around them, laughing and spinning, as guests paused to admire the scene that seemed to come from a dream. Riley rested her head against Wyatt's chest, hearing the familiar steady rhythm that once terrified him to expose, now offered without hesitation. "Wyatt," she whispered, "thank you for choosing growth, for choosing truth, for choosing us." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for giving me a life I never thought I deserved." She closed her eyes, letting the music, the warmth, and the quiet weight of the moment surround her. 10 years had passed since their beginning. A beginning built on pain, misunderstanding, courage, and transformation. A decade of choosing love, even on the days when it felt difficult. A decade of rebuilding trust, nurturing dreams, raising children, and becoming better versions of themselves. And now, as they swayed to the gentle melody of their shared life, Riley whispered 5 words she had not spoken with such depth since the night at the pier when everything changed. "I love you, Wyatt Kingsley." Wyatt's arms tightened around her, his voice trembling with emotion. "And I will love you," he whispered, "for every lifetime I am given." The wind drifted softly through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and the echo of their laughter. Above them, lanterns flickered like stars that had chosen to come closer, drawn by the enduring glow of a love that had been tested, broken, healed, and made whole again. And the city, ever-changing, ever-rising, held their story forever in its heart, proof that even the most fragile beginning could bloom into a timeless, unforgettable love. Every love story teaches us something, but some leave an imprint that stays long after the final chapter closes. Riley and Wyatt's journey reminds us that healing is not linear, trust is not automatic, and love, true love, is never built on perfection. It is built on honesty, growth, humility, and the courage to begin again even when the heart trembles. Their story shows us that people can change when they choose to. That redemption is possible when accountability walks hand in hand with sincerity. And that sometimes the greatest victories are not the ones achieved in boardrooms or through success, but in the quiet, vulnerable moments where two souls dare to meet without fear. It teaches us that we are allowed to break, we are allowed to rebuild, and we are allowed to demand a love that nurtures instead of wounds. Riley stepped into her strength without abandoning her softness. Wyatt learned that real power lies not in control, but in the willingness to be transparent and human. And together, they discovered that love is not a destination. It is a daily choice. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what moment moved you the most, or what lesson you'll carry with you. And to those who watched until the very end, write the word peer in the comments so we know you were here for every breath of this emotional journey. That small word will also help our channel grow and reach others who love stories like this. If you feel grateful for the team that brings these romances to life and wish to support our work, you can send a super thanks in any amount you feel comfortable with. Your kindness helps us continue creating these emotional journeys. And if you cannot support in that way, simply sharing this story with a friend or loved one makes an enormous difference. Do not leave just yet. There are more heartfelt narrations waiting for you. I've left similar stories in the cards so you can keep the emotions flowing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. And remember, love always begins again where honesty finally speaks.